All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wasm Cloud Wednesday for Wednesday, May 14th. Let me go ahead and share the agenda here. We're going to do something pretty special today, bringing back a recurring segment. As far as I know, we don't have a demo or any like long-standing discussion items that we were bringing over to this week. But one thing that we did want to do, and thank you so much, Eric, for this suggestion is I don't know if people look at the notes beforehand, but we actually have a space in the weekly highlights to talk about the issue of the week and the documentation page of the week. We did this quite a while ago just to highlight like, hey, new documentation is coming in. It's kind of hard to, yeah, I know that all of you read through all of the Wasm Cloud documentation every single week just to see if something has changed, but not everybody does that. So we want to make sure that we're calling out fun things that are coming across and fun issues to work on. So I just had some quick discussion items to call those out, and then get folks feedback on kind of bringing back this kind of recurring segment, and then we will go from there. So on the documentation page of the week, we actually had a really exciting. Oh wait, uh-oh, I linked the wrong things. Nope, that's not it either. Why did I just link the? Okay, well, the documentation page of the week is on error handling with custom interfaces and wRPC. Good job, Search, for helping that out. So this was actually a feature that we landed in Wasm Cloud 1.8 for all of our custom interfaces. Implicitly, when you make a custom interface, you run a component or a provider in Wasm Cloud that is converted to use wRPC and the component model encoding to send that over an RPC call. You can do it with NATS, you could do it with TCP or Quick. And we have a feature flag to turn this on since it's something that we're essentially experimenting with. We want to get some reps under our belt, like trying it out, seeing how it goes. But essentially, all you need to do for your custom interface is wrap your desired return type in a result and then make the error type this wRPC RPC error error. It is a resource that our Wasm Cloud host and the wRPC bindings beneath it understand, so that whenever you call this custom interface that's been generated by WitBindgen, or if you're calling it underneath some higher level RPC, if there was a problem during transport, which is not something that we would normally express in terms of the general hello world interface, say your socket disconnects or your NATS credentials change, you'll actually get an actionable error on the guest side that you can take action in response to it. So you can try to recall the function. Maybe it was like an intermittent error. You can bail in a different way using your own custom error implementation. You could maybe sleep for a second and try again. Really, it's so case by case about what you would want to do in the case of a platform level error. So this is the first step in making this so that this can work for any interface. Like right now for the Wasm Cloud messaging interface, we can let you know if there's a NATS problem by giving you back an error type with a string. But this lets you essentially opt into this with custom interfaces and opt into this level of error handling. Previously, for what it's worth, or just to set the baseline, what this would be is a hello world function that just returned a string. And if there was a platform level error, NATS disconnected, didn't have a proper link, the component would just panic at that point because we don't know what to do. That there was no way to give that feedback back. So this is the first step, I think, in a lot more robust custom interface support. But thank you so much. The real call out here is around the feature and also around the documentation. So this is great if anybody is taking a look. Want to see how you could use this, you just need Wasm Cloud 1.8 and come check out the errors page on the interfaces side. Did anybody have any questions on this docs page? Sorry, I saw some in chat. Oh yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, I hope that we can continue this documentation and issue of the week tradition. I think it's really nice to call out some of the new features, like when they land in docs and, additional things, because a lot of our documentation ends up being written in response to feedback from the Slack, from GitHub issues, just like, oh yeah, we probably should have a docs page on that. So it's really, really nice. Leading on actually from that, the issue that I linked, unfortunately, under the documentation side, so I'll get that fixed up, is that it would be nice to have a more of a Wasm Cloud specific example for the RPC error handling, on that documentation page. We showed an example from the wRPC examples repository, and this is the baseline, like this is exactly how it works. I think it would be really nice if we were to go into the Wasm Cloud repository where we have our examples. And for example, I know that we have like a composition example where you compose two components together, essentially like we do a hello world that calls another component called Pong. You just get a response back. It would be great to kind of redefine this wit. For example, it can be any could be any interface that's specific or more specific to Wasm Cloud. But the issue of the week here is really building this into an example that more shows off how this works in a real Wasm Cloud deployment. So I think it would be really, really nice to have that be something that's just not something that you have to go specifically to the interface error handling documentation to understand. It's just something that we use whenever we have a custom interface. I really don't see much of a reason to not. Sorry, it's bad grammar. Uh, I think we should always be using this. It's in my opinion pretty much always better to be able to take action off of the like in platform level error than to panic in the component and not be able to take action there. So if anybody's interested in taking this on, or they explore this and you create an example or you change your code to use this, happy to accept really any kind of example here. So this is a hot issue of the week to take a look at. Do folks have any other questions or anything, any suggestions on the Wasm Cloud specific example, like things that you'd like to see? I know we're just throwing out ping pong, which is a solid example, but I think there's plenty of room for additional feedback there. Alrighty. Um, other than that, I think the only other thing that was most of our regularly scheduled agenda, but I also wanted to bring up some of the interesting patterns that we're seeing in Wasm Cloud today. We have a new blog that went out yesterday. I'll post that link in the Zoom chat as soon as I can find it. But this is just on the Wasm Cloud documentation site under blog, really around platform engineering with Wasm and the platform harness pattern. The platform harness pattern is something that we're seeing much more commonly used for people who are really taking Wasm Cloud to host and run a platform internally for Wasm. And really, what this comes down to is the difference between the implementation of platform concerns and then user code. So that's kind of expressed in this diagram that's midway down the blog. But things like interacting with a file system, interacting with the environment, interacting with like proprietary internal things are all done with this platform harness component, since every single application essentially uses it in the same way. And the component that an individual developer works on is much, much smaller in scope. It essentially is just business logic, and we actually can compose those components together either when you build it using WebAssembly composition or when you run it using like dynamic links, wRPC, all the things that Wasm Cloud is good at. So I'm really curious because this platform harness is something that seems to resonate really well with folks who are running platforms internally and they're bringing Wasm Cloud into that workflow. So I am very curious about some of the folks who are on this call, um, who have been essentially with the community for quite a long time. I'm really interested in seeing what you think of this terminology, like how this resonates with what we've been trying to do with the Wasm Cloud project. There's nothing here that's like an architectural change that's required on the Wasm Cloud side. It's really just a pattern that I think we can document around and give recommendations. So really curious to hear if this is something that you would find yourself using in the general case or not. So plenty to talk about there too. Okay. Well, if anybody's read the platform harness blog, curious on your thoughts. But if not, I think that we pretty much are, we had a pretty light agenda today. So kind of at the end here. Oh yeah. Hey Victor, what you got? Oh, you might be double muted.
Yeah, I'm muted, or I was. You can hear me now, yeah. Hey, so I wanted to show some stuff I'd been working on and put up a pull request for. One of the things in the JavaScript ecosystem has that we've been working on sort of long term, and I'm not sure if Lachlan demoed some of the awesome work he did around integrating Hono or Hono. Um, it's Hono, really, but if he's done some of the demos for that. But one of the things we've been looking at recently was also making sure that Axios, which is a really popular request library, works for. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, Milan did an awesome demo. Awesome. Of the Hono stuff. So, for people watching online, make sure you go back and watch that. I think that maybe was last week, maybe a week before. But another thing that is really popular in the JS ecosystem is Axios, sort of an alternative to Fetch, while Fetch wasn't still quite everywhere / super easy to use, and still some people still prefer Axios because it is a bit easier to use. So I'll share my screen here real quick. And we've got the Wasm Cloud TypeScript repo, which is where all our TypeScript projects have moved to. There are still some TypeScript projects in WasmCloud, if I remember correctly, but this is really where you should look for newer stuff and honestly updated examples for TypeScript and sort of like best practices and things like that. So the PR that's actually up here is this one. So adding an example that uses Axios to do a fetch, right? So native fetch works just fine. So StarlingMonkey, which is the engine underneath, essentially that your JavaScript is running in when a WebAssembly component that's written in JavaScript is running, has support for fetch, and that sort of bubbles up to the tooling like componentized.js and Jaco, which is what we use when we build components with Wash, because we use standard tooling or standard across the ecosystem. And so fetch is supported, but it can be a question of what libraries you can pull in. And we have some examples that build Node.js like libraries. And those are nice, but obviously we can't have an example for every single kind of Node.js library that could be built. And trying to build native libraries, like for example, if you've ever seen like Node JIP, for example, in your builds for Node.js. That means you're sort of trying to build a native binding like a C++ or something else during the Node build. We can't include those because that has to do with linking and is a bit more complex when you're trying to make that into a WebAssembly component. But for libraries like Axios that have good both like sort of browser and sort of JavaScript native bindings, or sort of are written in a JavaScript native way, we can use them kind of simply. It does require some tweaking, and so this example is a good example, or is a good chance to show what that looks like. So I'll jump down here. The real important bit is the rollup file. So of course you can use any bundler you want. So you can use esbuild, you can use rollup, you can use roll down if you want. You can use whatever else. But the important thing to include, or the important things to include if you're using rollup and want to use node style dependencies, is that, oh yeah, roll down is real, by the way. Yeah, it's actually going to be quite prominent in the ecosystem soon. But yeah, you want to be able to resolve node. So you want to be able to replicate the sort of node require and resolution methodology in your project, because by default, the WebAssembly JavaScript toolchain is not going to do all the things that Node.js does when it tries to resolve a package, right? So you need to essentially do the bundling step ahead of time and get one JavaScript file out, and then Component.js and the ecosystem, the WebAssembly ecosystem tooling, the JS tooling, can work off one single JavaScript file. It's almost like you were, bundling for a super old browser or something like that. It's different, but kind of similar. You generally want a bundle. So here in the rollup config, we've got TypeScript, we've got the node resolution mechanism sort of as a plugin. We've got CommonJS supported, so all the features there. And this JSON is to enable JSON imports. So once you have rollup set up, and of course you can copy this setup and it'll just work. The code to use Axios looks like this. It's pretty simple. The actual code that you really need to care about is right here. There's not too much more than this. This bottom one is actually just an extra way to invoke this component. But here we're exporting the WASI CLI run interface, which means that you can run this with wasm time run or Jaco run, and then you can also call it with wash. So we do most of this is basic, pretty basic Axios stuff and pretty standard just in general. But we do get out to JSON placeholder.typecode, which is just a convenient site for just getting some JSON output back, and then we write to the to standard out with the stringified version of the response, which we get from, and of course, which Axios will turn into JSON for us sort of automatically. And it's really easy to use in that way. So the code is pretty simple, but it's always nice to have an example that you can just look at and kind of and grok to make it a bit easier. One thing I will show in addition to this is the WIT interface. So here's that WIT interface that corresponds to the JavaScript file we just saw. One thing I want to point out is that you don't see a import of WASI HTTP. For those who aren't familiar, when you make web requests from inside a WebAssembly module, you generally need to pull in the functionality to do that. So, for example, if we were making an outgoing request, you would normally see something here like import WASI HTTP outgoing handler. Now, in this case, we actually don't need to do that because Jaco and the sort of JavaScript WebAssembly ecosystem tooling will add in that import for you. Because fetch is always available, that import is always available, essentially. So it's even simpler than you would otherwise have to write in other languages. But just keep that in mind in case you're wondering, in the WASI sort of system, how are we able to make a HTTP call when we didn't ask for that capability, right? We didn't ask for that functionality. Well, it got added in when you built with Jacob. It's a little bit of can be a surprise to people. But yeah, so would love some feedback. If there are any other languages or I say languages, but I mean packages that people commonly use that you'd love us to make an example for, we'd also love to hear about it. And yeah, if you're trying to use Axios, you can start here and build whatever you're trying to build.
Victor, I just had a quick question. I'm actually not familiar with the Axios library, but does it do anything on the like HTTP incoming side, or is it just like a fetch? Or I say just, but like is it primarily like an outgoing HTTP thing?
Yeah, it's primarily outgoing HTTP. And there's a lot of like complexity in there. You could do things like attach hooks and like do pre and post processing, and you can modify it in a lot of ways. But I think one of the main reasons people reach for it is that it just has slightly better defaults than fetch, and is a little bit more automatic. And of course, projects that were built a while ago before fetch was as ergonomic as it is now would clearly be using Axios. And so it's just like at this point there's a bunch of legacy code that is also built with Axios, and Axios is still good. So it's definitely widely used.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Oh, and Aditya has a great point in the chat that the error handling with Axios is way better. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are very big fans and like Axios a lot more than Fetch, but it's one of those things that is always worth mentioning.
I guess this also so like from a new example perspective, this is really nice, like really clean. I guess this also has, the more examples we get under our belt with like libraries just working TM, like feasibly there's JavaScript code out there that uses Axios in a really simple way that now, or just with like a bundling assistance could just compile to the WebAssembly component and speak WASI HTTP without like changing the original code. That was
Yeah,
a question.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
right.
that's definitely what this unlocks. I mean, like, so with this configuration, you're able to at the very least things that use Axios, you'll be able to use, and a lot of this same configuration will work for a lot of other libraries, right? Especially ones that are isomorphic, so they run in both the browser and Node. But I'm glad you asked that question or statement. You stated that question statement because that's a great time to note the Node support that will eventually land in StarlingMonkey, and maybe even somewhere else, because I think it depending on how we want to move this through the ecosystem, we do want Node.js built-ins in StarlingMonkey, componentized JS, Jaco, etc., bubbling its way up, which means that you'll get sort of Node support in your WebAssembly components without doing anything, right? And so this theoretically, because there's a long tail of sort of JavaScript packages, just unlocks all of the npm ecosystem. So right now, a lot of the npm ecosystem and sort of JavaScript ecosystem, whether in the browser or in Node, is available if it's pure JavaScript, right? Because all you need to do is bundle it together. It's just JavaScript. It runs in StarlingMonkey. It runs in Wasm like normal. But if you use some right now, if you use some interfaces, or I would say some standard library functions from Node, for example, that rely on platform things, right? Like, for example, if you try and get a random number and Node expects dev/u random to be there and to try and use it to get a secure random number, that's obviously not going to work in WebAssembly. And so someone has to do the work to port the sort of Node standard library, as we say. Technically, what Node.js brings is the standard library. So it's a little redundant to say a Node.js standard library, because it's Node plus V8 is really what Node is. But the point is that someone has to do that. Someone has to implement the same FS interface or the same random interface and make that available. And so there are plans that this will happen at the StarlingMonkey level eventually, but that just means that it'll be available at the WebAssembly JS component level without users having to do anything. You just have to write your component like normal, pull in your import like normal, and then hopefully the Node shim works and makes whatever you pulled in just work off the shelf, which would be awesome. Oh, I see there was a comment by Jochen in the chat here. Oh yeah, he's pointing out the Hello World example. I'm really glad you like that because one of the things we did very intentionally was to, in the quick start, sort of show the quickest way to get started with. And sorry, to a little bit of context. This is the Hello World example. So this is the HTTP Hello World example, which is a basic server that just serves, literally returns Hello World when you throw GET requests at it. And in the docs, we show the quickest way to get started, which is wash dev, which will start your component, start the necessary providers. Here's a sort of description. I won't go through it because you can read faster than I can talk. But we also include the slow start, which is nice because it shows how to do what wash dev would have done for you a little bit slower with just wash, right? Because before wash dev existed, these were the steps that anyone could use to build a component, start a component on a running Wasm Cloud Lattice, which feels like a word we haven't used in a while, the lattice word. But how you could run a component in sort of like the slow, sort of manual way. And so we were happy to include this because I think it's great to remember or to have other options so that people feel like they know the system a little more, a little deeper. So we also love feedback on this stuff. So if you find any docs that are broken, please file an issue. Issues are also contributions. So just keep that in mind.
Oh, yeah, and I saw you were unmuted. I didn't know if you.
No, it's nothing more to say. It's just say this is a great thing. It's not just magic behind the scenes, but really then visibly, the next step is visibly go through the single steps. Then you can learn more from that.
Yeah. Is there any other questions or feedback for Victor? Victor, thanks so much for coming in and showing off some of this work. This is super awesome to see. Alrighty. Well, hey, I actually got a message behind the scenes and wanted to share and give kudos just for one more thing to Aditya, who's been doing a ton of work on across a bunch of different issues on the Wasm Cloud side. I think that he was in here a little earlier. Maybe I can't see it anymore, but Aditya, if you're still watching, huge kudos to you. You've been putting in a ton of work on many different issues, especially since becoming a maintainer. And on, on the Wasm Cloud side, you've been pulling this a cron job capability provider through a good couple rounds of feedback. Like we've looked at the interface, you've been implementing it in a distributed fashion, you've integrated it into the runtime, iterating on the WIT, iterating on the provider. So this is a pretty, I think the idea itself of calling something on a cron trigger is simple, and the way to do it in a distributed way with many providers, running across like a whole lattice is more complex. So I think great job carrying this one forward. I was going to ask the a question. And you're not here, so sad. I'll message you later. I saw that you said it was ready for review, but then to hold off since Nats has some new features that may make this a little bit simpler. So we'll look towards your feedback on that one. And then also for coming in kind of out of nowhere in the best way to be like, hey, now we can set memory limits per component. And this is awesome. I haven't taken a look at this one in depth. I think I think we'll probably want to take a look and see how much changes on the control interface. And if it's not a lot, then we should roll it out as soon as we can. The control interface is one of those big old things, but huge. I think you've come in and changed something that basically goes down the whole stack all the way down to the Wasm time engine level layer. So awesome work, Aditya. Please keep bothering us if we're holding you up on reviews. So but just a huge shout out for coming in and taking something that we've kind of wanted to do for quite a while. Oh hey, there you are. Hey, Aditya, we were just talking about you. I don't know if you're in a place to chat, but awesome work on some of the issues that you've been working on lately. I would just wanted to ask if the cron job capability provider PR, if you wanted a review on that one now, or if you did want us to wait for a future Nats version so that we can have that as an option too. And feel free to respond via chat or whatever too. Oh, okay. Nice. Um, yeah, great. Sorry, in chat he said he could implement the updated one in a few days. So I guess yeah, we just need to get 2.11.2 in there. Would would the updated version so for the updated version under the documentation, we would just say, hey, if you're using the cron capability provider, make sure to have your Nats version set up as a minimum to 2.11.2. And in like wash dev and everything, we can update that version so that everybody's on that like by the default for Wasm Cloud. Is that kind of what you were thinking there? I see. Oh yes, absolutely. But I don't know if you said that before. Just that the test util uses. Oh, okay. So we're just a patch version behind. Psh, easy. Um, okay. Awesome. Man, this probably looks like I'm just talking to myself here, but Adia is really here and messaging in the call, I swear. Awesome. Well, hey man, just awesome job on some of the like recent work you've been taking. The per component memory limits is something that we really wanted to do for a long time. So thank you so much for taking those issues and just jumping in on everything. And don't worry about not coming on call. You know, this is like in the middle of the day, so everybody's got stuff all the time. So, all right, folks. Well, that was actually that was all that I had really planned to that I really wanted to talk about today. Did folks have anything else that they wanted to discuss generally in Wasm Cloud land? Alrighty. Well, I think we can give folks a little bit of time back today, but thank you all for coming to Wasm Cloud Wednesday, talking about issues and documentation and new exciting things in the JavaScript ecosystem. So as always, this agenda for the community meeting is totally open. So if you're working on something cool in WebAssembly land, or you did something cool with Wasm Cloud, or you have a feature that you want to discuss, just put up a PR, change the agenda. Like, we welcome everything on this call. So would love to have everybody participate like you all do every week. With that, I think we'll go ahead and call it, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a Wasm Cloud day.